Well, hello everyone, and welcome back to another installment in our reviewed and ranked series. Today is the second to last member of the standard cast. Of course, we still have the unlockable and DLC characters to cover in the coming weeks, so make sure that you're subscribed so you don't miss any of those instances as they come around. But let's jump in and talk a little bit more about today's character, that of course being Wasp. I personally think that Wasp is one of the best designed characters in this game in terms of how she functions, and we'll talk a little bit more about that as we get into the base function of her character as well as her abilities. If you find today's video helpful and or enjoyable, make sure you hit that like button, and let's start off by talking about the team build synergies that Wasp possesses. She actually doesn't have a whole lot, which is kind of surprising. She has a total of 4, 1 in the Mastery category with Original Avengers, thus confirming that this is the Janet Van Dyne version of the Wasp and not the Hope Pym variant of the character. We also have a Vitality synergy with the Ultimate Alliance 3, and then 2 Energy synergies, one with Avengers and one with Women of Marvel. And these are not super strong synergies, though the Mastery and Energy synergies are quite nice to have if you can get them active, as that increases the efficiency of your ability and synergy attacks, as well as allowing you to crank out more of them, which is very important for Wasp's character design. Moving over to the basic attacks that are within Wasp's kit, we have the basic attack sequence, which is a series of energy blasts out of her wrist blasters there. And there are 5 different hits in the basic attack combo, though the first 4 hits do not deal any sort of knockback or staggering to your opponents. The last one does a minor amount. The last hit does a minor amount of knockback, but Wasp does thrive a little bit better in combat scenarios when she can create a little bit of distance between her opponents, though she is quite versatile in how she is able to move around the battlefield, so she does have that in her advantage. The heavy attack for Wasp involves an arc of some heavier energy blasts that do provide knockback and actually deal damage to stagger gauges, whereas the basic attacks in her sequence will not. And as she swings her arm around, she sends out 4 different blasts that arc out in front of her in a little bit of a fan type area, though it's very concentrated in the distribution and fan of that attack. And it does decently well and works for the character. It's just a little bit of a letdown in my opinion that the basic attack sequence doesn't have a little bit more oomph to it. Wasp, of course, having wings, does possess the flight attribute when pressing the jump button while airborne, and this is again helpful for avoiding a lot of the floor type hazards and traps that are strewn about the battlefield, and you do still have that cautionary warning of having the energy points consumed while the flight mechanic is being used, so make sure that you are using that ability sparingly. Upon pressing the attack button when falling down from the flight or out of a jump, Wasp will send out a series of those energy blasts just down in front of where she is located, and those energy blasts will deal a little bit of that concussive knockback or deter some of the retaliation from your opponents. However, it does have a weird stutter in it, as it's not a constant stream of attacks coming down, which I don't really like. And that's really the only complaint with the attacks that I have, apart from the basic attack combo not being able to stagger the opponents as they are attacked into. But we'll move on from that. The last standard feature in Wasp's kit involves her blocking and dodging animation, and this is one of those animations that I really love. She does have a fairly standard arm brace crossed out in front of her to protect herself from oncoming blows, but when she dodges out of the way, instead of rolling or simply dashing in the direction, she will minimize, as that is a ability that is granted to her due to the use of the Pym particle, and she will dash in the direction that you influence, shrinking as she is in transit before growing large again as she gets to the determined destination. Pivoting over to talk a little bit about the abilities that Wasp possesses, we do start off with the Wasp Sting. This is a decent ability. It does have its weak points, but it also has a couple of unique attributes that are good for it. The Wasp Sting involves a series of repetitive electric attacks being shot out in the direction that the character is facing. You can mash on this button to repeatedly attack, and you can influence the direction that the character is facing as those shock blasts are sent out against your opponents. This ability has the energy attack type and the rapid fire synergy trait, and it has a C classification to damage and to energy points consumed. This is not a great ability to use against stagger bars, as it does have an E classification to the stagger rating. However, because it does have the shock ability attribute, it does have the ability to prevent characters from going into their blocking animation where the stagger is then depleted because of the retaliation and recoil that they are taking from that shock element. We're not quite done talking about the Wasp Sting, but we do need to talk about a different ability first. So we'll round off at this little section by pointing out that as the ability is ranked up, it benefits from a reduced energy point cost, an increase to the attack damage, an increase to the damage dealt to the stagger gauge, and finally a reduced chance of the attack being interrupted. Wasp's second ability is the Tiny Tornado, and this actually does quite well for this character. She will shrink down and do a series of spins to create a vortex that then goes out in front of the character out in the direction that she was facing upon initiating the move. And this does have that electrical attribute to it as it travels out before that dissipates out a little bit upon arriving at its final destination. However, you can combo the Wasp Sting into the Tiny Tornado, and not only will it continue to have some of that shock attribute and element to it, it will also fling the Wasp Stings out away from the tornado, thus expanding upon the area of influence that this attack has. And that is a very powerful ability combo, much more powerful than those type of combos that we've seen from characters such as Star-Lord and Crystal. This really works quite well for Wasp and helps to amplify the damage that she is able to dole out. The Tiny Tornado has the energy attack type and the whirlwind synergy trait, and the attack is quite strong, possessing an A classification to damage and a C classification to energy points consumed. It does not have a rating for the stagger gauge, because if it does land in a group of opponents, it will toss them up into the air, and thus not allowing them to have any damage dealt to their stagger, as they are otherwise rendered useless or immobile during that time. As this attack is ranked up, it has the benefit of the energy point cost being reduced, the increase to the attack damage that it deals, an increased duration, and finally a reduced chance of the attack being interrupted. The third ability that Wasp possesses is called the Big Surprise, and this is one of the few unique attacks. I like the way that it looks visually, but it can be underwhelming because it is one of the few, if not the only, attacks in the game that revolves around RNG. And what this basically entails is Wasp will throw out an object, which will then become enlarged in the air, and then it will fall down and crush the opponents that it comes down on top of. Most of the objects will explode upon reaching contact with the ground, those being the bottle caps, the wrapped candies, or the candy bars. And the fourth item that can appear out of this is the fidget spinner, and that will spin around for a short time before retreating backwards. I think that the fidget spinner is one of the weaker of the items within this kit, and it's just not a super awesome ability, especially when compared with other abilities and the chained abilities of the Tiny Tornado Wasp Sting that Wasp possesses. But it certainly is not an ability that you should shy away from if you needed to use it in a pinch, especially to clear out a group of opponents that have been drawn into one central location. This ability has the energy attack type, the slam synergy trait, and has C's across the board with the damage, energy point cost, and stagger damage dealt. As this attack is ranked up, it has the standard reduction to the energy point cost to use the ability, a an increase to the attack damage dealt, an increase to the damage done to the stagger gauge, and finally that reduced chance of the attack being interrupted. Wasp's fourth ability is the Biocharge, where Wasp will gather electricity and then go rushing forward. This button can be held down to power up the move and kind of aim it in the direction that she needs to go. And with these type of charge attacks, they tend to be quite powerful, and Wasp's Biocharge is no exception. This attack has the melee attack type, the charge synergy trait, and has a C classification to the damage and energy points consumed, while maintaining a very respectable A classification to the stagger damage dealt by this move. And as many abilities that we have seen before, this attack benefits from the reduced energy point cost, an increase to the attack damage dealt, an increase to the stagger damage dealt, and a reduced chance of the attack being interrupted as the attack is ranked up. Wasp's extreme ability is a little bit overwhelming visually, but it does get the job done, and it's quite quick in its execution. It involves Wasp sending out a barrage of those electrical attacks in a very condensed spherical type area as she darts around miniaturized, and then her final detonation does involve a larger electrical discharge emanating from her own person in the center of that sphere of influence. The whole attack is over in less than 4 seconds, again making this one of the fastest extreme abilities in the game, and it does quite well in large groups and decent against those mini boss type characters. The only other standard caution that needs to be levied with this particular extreme ability is Wasp will not course correct or turn or move a whole lot with this attack, so make sure that you are close to the opponents that you are wanting to target, and make sure you are facing the direction you want to be when executing this attack. But apart from that, it does get the job done. So now that we have looked at everything that Wasp has to offer, it is time for us to determine where she falls within our character tier list. Now, I did say at the beginning of the video that she is one of the best designed characters, though I don't know that she would be within the very best characters in terms of overall function. Again, I'm comparing back to the characters that we have ranked in the top of the list of characters, and she doesn't quite have what it takes, though with the sheer amount of damage output that she can do by chaining those two abilities together, I do feel like she is quite powerful and works a lot better than even a lot of the characters that we have listed in this B tier, with the exception of maybe Kamala, but she's a little bit more quirky and doesn't have that distance benefit. So having weighed out all of my options and looking at how Wasp functions as a character, I am going to place her right here at the tail end of A tier. And I'm willing to look past the issues that she has with her basic attacks not causing opponents to be staggered because of the other abilities and chain combos that she is able to unleash. I do think that she is very powerful and worth giving a shot if you have no experience playing this character, because she is a lot of fun to play with as well. But what do you think? Do you agree with my analysis? Do you disagree? Be sure to let me know what your thoughts are in the comments down below. And once again, if you made it this far into the video, make sure that you're subscribed for that daily variety content. Thanks again for your time, and I hope that you have a fantastic rest of your day.